Happy day, everybody. I'm Daniel Brafman, holistic health and performance coach. And today we're discussing for our personal growth call, Maxwell Maltz's Cybernetics, chapter 13, how to turn a crisis into a creative opportunity. I know that usually I talk about how excited I am about this and that and the other thing. This chapter in particular, I'm going to say I'm excited about because I actually, so far, this is the one I'm most excited about just because it's the one that I'm most familiar with. Basically, the way I understand this chapter of how to turn a crisis into a creative opportunity, it's about preparation for a crisis and doing things in a manner that will allow you to know what needs to be done without having to think about what needs to be done. And that's how a creative opportunity presents itself in a crisis, when the acute variables that are beyond anything that we should be including in the actual quote unquote practice of what we're doing. I think a lot of people out there know that I am an athlete. I am also an academic and a very spiritual person, and pretty much most of my day is occupied with something that I would call a practice, whether it's a meditation, whether it's studying an outlook of the way of the world, like in the Tao Te Ching, or Wayne Dyer's version of the Tao Te Ching, or whatever it may be, as a swimmer, as a yogi. It's all practice. And I'm constantly sort of finding myself in a place where I'm reminding people, and I don't just mean random, people who might go, what's this all about? And these are people who I'm very close with. These are people that I study with. These are people that I coach. These are people that I learn with, including a very, very dear friend of mine who happens to be a Catholic priest. And I'm constantly reminding him when he feels the time pressure of all of the different duties that he has in his service to his community, that he often feels that he's not, taking care of his own spiritual growth, his own personal growth in that. And I have to constantly keep reminding him that everything is taking care of that and in preparation. But, I'm going to back up a little bit and get my coaching hat on for this one, because sometimes it's a little easier to understand these in metaphors where we can create visuals around this. There's a long-standing sort of debate in the athletic world, in particular the endurance world, and in particular the marathon world. Now, most people that run marathons are completely incapable of doing a marathon in under 3 hours, yet they are of the belief that in order to be prepared to do a marathon, they need to run however long they think it's going to take them to get to the finish line. And I've never been of that mindset. And the people that I study in the sporting world, in the coaching world, typically also don't believe in that. There's a point at which your body learns what it needs to learn, and then it needs to rest. And in fact, the body definitely learns, it learns best in two ways. One is it learns best when you're fresh and when you're fully attending to what's happening. So, the beginning of a workout is critically important. And actually, the beginning of the workout for our purposes is all the way to the point where fatigue starts to degrade the quality of the work being done. Because that's the other end where the work seems to gel much more easily than that middle space. There's a full spectrum of opportunities to learn. And the beginning parts, once we get warmed up and once we get into, our rhythm, is what really sets us up. But once we start to fatigue, we come up with strategies just to keep going. And those strategies typically give us diminishing returns, but more importantly, they override all the other messages that you've learned while you were fresh, attentive, and doing what you're supposed to do. the great coach and football guru, Vince Lombardi, is famously quoted for saying, practice makes perfect. Well, he's famously misquoted. What he literally said was, perfect practice makes perfect. And this chapter really does focus on the fact that you don't really accomplish what you hope to accomplish when you're practicing something in a crisis mode. That's not time for practice. That's actually, if you're in crisis mode, that's the whole point of the practice, is to be able to train yourself to stay in a groove when all of these other variables that you couldn't possibly have anticipated, or maybe you could anticipate them and that became part of your practice. But either way, when they come bearing down on you, if you're already in a groove, it's less likely that that will derail you and turn it into a true crisis. If something's only a crisis when everything that you're trying to do just completely falls apart. And after the fact, you still don't learn the lesson. We've said it over and over and over again, throughout all of the personal growth calls, that, life will deliver lessons and the lessons will repeat themselves until we learn the lessons. So here, I'm going to keep the call almost just to this, which is practice is for real. Practice isn't for pretend. Practice is something that at some point you need to visualize as a component of the practice. There may be a physical component. There may be a response component to a practice that prepares you for an event. Knowing that there's only so much that you can do to ready yourself for an event, and then you just have to trust yourself. You have to be able to remind yourself that every time something bad happens, it's really not all that bad, because you always get through it. If you're on this call, you've gotten through plenty of crisis moments, and what have we learned from that? I don't know. I know what I learned from the different things. I know that I'm willing to sit with, the lessons. I'm also willing to sit with criticisms and etc. But here, when you're trying to turn a crisis into a creative opportunity, opportunity is sort of the operative here. You can't present yourself with an opportunity in practice. That's the one variable that you can't do. An opportunity, you wouldn't want to replicate saving a child from under a car. You just wouldn't. It's ridiculous. If you tried to lift a car and you weren't fully, didn't have the opportunity of an actual crisis, you wouldn't have the stimulus that it would require to upregulate your hormonal system to give you superhuman strength in a moment of need. So there's an opportunity in that, but you do need to be prepared. If you're a person who's never done a squat, who's never done anything to improve your grip strength, even in a crisis, you may be able to get that car off your kid, but then you're the one who's going to end up in the hospital because all of that effort is going to break you down. So practice is something that should be done when you're calm. It's something that you should be done when you're attentive. And we need to limit practice to this fresh space of brackets that say, beginning, I feel good. I'm going to do my warm-up, I'm going to get in the groove, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing until, and this becomes your end point, I break form. If it's a gym idea, if you break form, what you're learning is how to break form. You want to stop before that happens, and whether it's a mental emotional practice, whether it's a spiritual practice, or whether it's a physical practice, you want to limit the practice to where you can functionally pay attention to what you're doing. So with that, I'm going to kind of leave the call to an end. And thank you very much for showing up on an incredibly beautiful day after 9 crappy days in Washington, D.C. of it really being the wrong Washington. And, if you have any questions, please, I will post this on Facebook, but you can also reach me at www.danielbrafman.com. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to take on any criticism for these calls. You know, I too have lessons to learn, and this is a process for me. This is a practice for me. And if I don't get the feedback, and if you all don't serve as a proper mirror for me, I'm not going to grow with you. And I am on this call to grow with you, not watch you grow and then just let it go. So thank you very much for being here. Peace out, everybody.